Hey guys, Kelly again for Vance Outdoors, and in this video we're going to cover how to load and unload your firearm, as well as a few other concerns when it comes to safely handling your firearm. So when it comes to loading our magazines, the first thing that we want to do is make sure that we have the right magazine for our firearm, as well as the right caliber of ammunition. If you take a look at your magazine, easy way to tell which direction things go, if you kind of take a look at the bottom right here, I have a flat part of my magazine and I have a round part of my magazine. When I take my entire cartridge, I want my cartridge to go in the same direction and same pattern as the magazine in and of itself, so that I match flat part of cartridge to flat part of the magazine. So if I turn my magazine over just like this, I'm a right-handed shooter, so I like doing things with my right hand. But what I'm going to do is this orange part right here is called our follower. If you kind of take a look, if I push the follower down, it looks like there's two little feed lips that are run on either side of this magazine. I want to make sure that I start the back of that cartridge just ahead of those feed lips, so that then I can push down into my follower. Once I've kind of cleared those lips, then I can push back all the way towards the rear of that magazine. That way then I'm still matched flat part to flat part and round part to round part. Now when I go to load the second round in behind it, I'm going to do the exact same thing to kind of help myself out a little bit so that I'm not interacting with a round part of each side of the cartridge. I like to take my thumb and start that push down process ahead of time. That way then it kind of gives me a little bit of an added advantage to it. So that I'm going to start again just in front of those feed lips so that I can push down and push back. And I'm just going to continue to repeat that as long as I have ammunition and for however many rounds I want to place inside of my magazine. That way then once I'm set and ready to go, I can take this and load it directly into my gun. Now when it comes to loading rifle magazines, they're going to be just a little bit different from the pistol magazines. If you take a look at the bottom, we don't have the same directionality as we do with our pistol magazine, where we've got a flat part to flat part and round part to round part. Instead, it looks kind of all about the same. The best way to tell with rifle magazines is either something similar to what's going on with this magazine, where I have a little bit of a photograph up here at the top that actually shows me the directionality of my bullet and my cartridge. Or if I don't have a photograph on my magazine, if I take a look at the very top, again, looking at the follower here, if I push the follower down a little bit, I still have those same two feed lips up at the top, and those feed lips are always going to hold onto the cartridge rather than the bullet end of itself. Now with this magazine in particular, it's going to load just a little bit differently from our pistol magazines. If you're shooting another kind of rifle or using another kind of rifle magazine, something similar to this magazine is going to function in terms of loading the same way as a pistol magazine would be, which is starting just ahead of those feed lips and pushing down. Now this magazine specifically does have this little catch and this little follower right here where I can pull this down instead of having to push repeatedly like I do with the pistol magazine, which can make loading this a little bit easier. Not every magazine is going to come like that, so it will depend on your caliber of rifle as well as type of magazine that you're shooting. So with this magazine, the best way to get it loaded, again, I want to make sure that I'm holding my cartridge in the right direction. Now with this one, I don't have to start ahead of those feed lips and push down and back. Instead, I can actually start just right over top of it, like I've got right here, and push down, which can make loading these magazines just a little bit easier and a little bit more friendly. I can also be a little bit faster in terms of getting my gun, or my magazine, I should say, reloaded. That way then I can load this straight into my rifle. Now when we talk about loading a revolver, it's going to be just a little bit different from our semi-automatics. With a semi-automatic, I have that magazine which I can completely remove from my firearm versus having the cylinder still attached to my gun. Because I am going to show you how to load this here on the table, I am going to use what's called snap caps or dummy rounds. So these do not function in any way, shape, or form. That way then I am not loading a firearm in an unsafe direction. So from there, the best way to get your revolver loaded is if your cylinder is closed, is to go ahead and press your cylinder release. That way then my cylinder will drop out and away from my firearm. From there then, if I kind of readjust it here and show you, I'm going to take my cartridge and I'm going to load it so that my bullet will go down, basically being in the same direction as my barrel. That way then I can get everything going in the same direction. Now that with this cylinder, I can load everything all at the same time. Certain revolvers, I might have a loading gate where I'll have to load one round individually at a time, but that will depend on your firearm. So make sure to check your owner's manual to see how is best to load your particular gun. From there then, once I have all my cartridges in, I'm going to set my cylinder back inside of my gun, make sure that it's locked in place, and then I'm set and ready to go. Our magazines are loaded and we're ready to begin firing. So what we want to do is making sure that we're paying attention to our 4 primary firearm safety rules. My muzzle's pointed in a safe direction, my finger's up nice and high in towards that slide. I want to grab my magazine and going so that my bullets are going in the same direction as my barrel. I want to load it in towards the bottom here, which is where my magazine well is. I'm going to push that magazine all the way to make sure that it gets seated. So make sure that it is seated all the way because it could be loud in here. I might not hear that click. I want to pull and give it a little tug at that bottom. Reason being is that if I don't load it all the way, I could potentially find myself where I cause a malfunction or I just don't get that first round loaded properly. I want to give it that tug because if it starts to pull away, that tells me right away that I haven't had it loaded, which gives me the opportunity to push it back in. So now that it is seated all the way, I want to grab the back of the slide, and when I grab the back of the slide, I want to pull back and let it go, or what we call as a slingshot motion. The thing that we don't want to do is just pull back and ride it forward. That could cause a malfunction in and of itself. These guns are hardy. They're going to take you being able to pull back and let go as hard as possible. But now that that slide is forward, we have a round loaded in the chamber, we're ready to begin firing. Now that we're ready to unload our pistol is going to look in one of 2 ways. It's either going to look how it is right now, where our slide is locked open, because most modern firearms will lock open on an empty magazine, or our slide will still be closed, either because it didn't catch on our magazine, it's not designed to catch on the magazine, or our firearm is still loaded. I'm going to show you how to do it in both ways. So right now with our slide locked open, first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and hit that magazine release, taking our magazine and setting it off to the side. From there then, I'm building myself good habits in terms of safety. Even though I know this chamber is empty, I am going to rack this slide 3 times. So I'm going to pull back and let go. There's 1, 2, and 3. And I'm going to pull back, lock my slide open, and check the chamber again. Now if our slide is locked forward, either because the firearm is loaded in the particular case of this one, or because it didn't catch, I'm going to perform the same exact steps. So I'm going to hit that magazine release first, taking that magazine and setting it off to the side, and I'm going to rack that slide 3 times. Again, building good habits for ourselves. So there's 1, and as you can see, that first round came out, but I don't want to trust solely that that entire round came out on its own, so I'm still going to rack that 2 more times. So there's 2, 3, and then I'm going to lock it open again and check to make sure that that chamber is empty. Once my chamber is empty, I know it's clear, I can set it down, either reload my magazine or go about what I was doing for the rest of the day. When we go to load our rifles, we're going to do the same exact thing, following our 4 primary rules of firearm safety. Muzzle safely downrange, finger up high off the trigger. We're going to grab our magazine, same thing, making sure that our bullet is going in the same direction as our barrel. We're going to put it in our magazine well, make it seat all the way, again giving it a little tug to make sure. And with this modern sporting rifle, there's a bolt release, which is this button right back here, and we're going to push on that with our thumb, which will send that bolt forward, loading our first round, so we're ready to go with our rifle. Now that I'm ready to unload my rifle, first thing I'm going to do with this particular rifle, it has a safety on it, so I do want to activate that safety. From there then, I'm going to press on my magazine release. That way then I can get my magazine out and away from my gun. If this is still loaded, I don't want to continue to put rounds still in the chamber if that's not my intention. So I'm going to set my magazine off to the side. Now this rifle does have a round loaded in the chamber. Since I don't want to fire that round, that means I need to get it out of the way. So I'm going to grab my charging handle, and I'm going to get into a good habit of racking that charging handle 3 times. Reason being 3 times is that if I forget a step, something like forgetting to remove my magazine, or if something happens where it doesn't catch that round all the way to be able to remove it, it gives me that opportunity to get that round out of there in a safe manner. So I'm going to grab my charging handle, I'm going to pull back once. As you can see, that round did come out of the chamber, but like I said, we're building good habits. So I want to rack that 2 more times. There's my second, there's my third. Now I want to open my bolt, that way then I can actually check my chamber to make sure there's nothing in there. From there then, I'm going to pull back on my charging handle, going to my bolt release, I'm going to push on the bottom of it, which will catch that bolt, so I can send that charging handle forward, and now I can check and see, nothing's in there, I'm clear. I can set my gun down, and if I want to, reload my magazine or pack up and go home. Now I'm ready to shoot my revolver, making sure that I am pointed safely downrange, finger up nice and high away from that trigger. Once my cylinder is out and down, I'm going to grab my cartridges, loading them all in so they're pointed in the right direction. Now if I need to with a revolver, I might point this muzzle down just a little bit. That way then gravity can help me load these rounds in, rather than trying to force them in or trying to if my cylinder doesn't fall far enough away from my gun, trying to mess with it from there. So now that my cartridges are loaded, lock that cylinder in place, and I'm ready to go. Now that I'm finished firing, what I'm going to do, keeping my finger still up and away from that trigger, I'm going to hit my cylinder release. I'm going to push on that cylinder so that it drops it away, and I'm going to tilt it up a little bit to let gravity help me unload those cases for me. As you can see, most of them came out. Now, with revolvers, it is fairly common for casings to get stuck, usually after firing. From there, then, I'm going to use that ejection rod to kind of help push those rounds out a little bit, so they'll get to where they're at right now, which then I can just grab them with my fingers and pull them out in the way. Then, if I wanted to, I can either reload this and continue back with what I was doing, or I can pack it up and go for the day. So remembering our safety and our 4 firearms rules, if I'm handing off my firearm to another individual, I don't want to hand it off as is, because John, who's with me today, doesn't know if this firearm's loaded or unloaded. So to make sure that I'm handing him a safe weapon, what I want to do is first take my muzzle and point it in that safest direction. In the particular case of where we're at right now, our safest direction is towards the floor. Once I'm towards the floor, I'm going to drop that magazine out. I'm going to rack that slide 3 times. And I'm going to lock it open. And this is where I'm going to do my visual and physical check of the chamber, as well as the magazine well. Now that I know that this firearm is empty, I'm going to pass it off to John, where John is also going to perform a visual and physical check of the chamber and the magazine well to make sure that it's empty, so that I know it's empty, and so does John. Thanks for watching. Make sure you check out the rest of our videos for new firearms owners.